Carter G. Woodson, I can see your meek and humble face. Carter G. Woodson, you brought so much power to our race. Carter G. Woodson, your spirit is still so vibrantly alive. Carter G. Woodson, may your name be sanctified. Carter G. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson, the first child born of 9, spent all his youth working in the coal mines. His formal education he began at 20, and once he got started, he sure got a plenty. The B.A., the M.A., the Ph.D., yet he never put himself above you and me. He knew that education didn't mean a degree. It means how we serve our race and all humanity. I said he knew that education didn't mean a degree. It means how we serve our race and all humanity. Carter G. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson. He brought meaning to the words, know thyself. He said you start with your history before all else. We're the parent of all humans on this earth, yet today we still struggle to reclaim our worth. He gave us a week, and now we have a month, but until it's every day, we must keep working on this front.
Good afternoon. This is Dr. Ron Daniels, president of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, and we are here to welcome you to this momentous occasion. You are going to be part of the launching of a milestone movement as we move to, on this final day of Black History Month. Of course, we know that Black History Month is every day, every year, and all the time. But specifically, we are looking to start a movement to make February Global African History Month. And you are going to be a part of that process, we hope. Well, we're launching this on a platform which was created by one of the most progressive, revolutionary people of our time, a true legend who is the architect of the Black World Media Network. And at this point, I'm asking our virtual audience from all across the globe to give a rousing welcome to none other than Don Rojas, the Director of Communications and International Relations for the Institute of the Black World 21st Century, formerly the Press Secretary for Maurice Bishop, and much, much more. Don Rojas, please join us and give people a sense of what the Black World Media Network is and will be about. Don Rojas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniels, and good evening, sisters and brothers and comrades. Allow me to take a minute to welcome all of our distinguished panelists this evening and to thank them in advance for sharing their time, their wisdom, and scholarship with us. The Black World Media Network team and I have honored that this stellar group of intellectual heavyweights has committed some of their invaluable time to engage with us this evening. And we look forward to a rich and powerful exchange of ideas and perspectives. On February the 3rd, we commenced a month-long launch of the Black World Media Network, a multi-platform digital Pan-African communications initiative. And on this final day of Black History Month 2022, we are completing the rollout. Our strategic objective in launching this network is to create a daily digital destination, a must-stop place in cyberspace where people of African descent around the world can connect with each other, catch the latest news about each other, inspire, support, and empower each other. Our aim is to connect the geographical and cultural dots from north to south and from east to west in this huge and diverse global community of Black people that spans all the world's continents. Our network is utilizing cutting-edge information and internet technologies to aggregate, organize, distribute, and archive compelling multimedia content that can be read, heard, and viewed anywhere, anytime, and on any device that connects to the internet, from your computer to your tablet, to your mobile phone and your smart TV. You can find the Black World Media Network everywhere. In reading our news stories and in listening to our online radio station or viewing our videos on demand, you will find content that is not available in today's mainstream and corporate media. At our 24/7 online radio station, we have carefully curated a playlist that integrates progressive conscious music from artists across the Pan-African world with news, commentaries, PSAs, and audio clips of great Pan-African leaders past and present. Here you can enjoy music that warms your heart, fills your soul, and makes you want to move your body to the beats, but music that also makes you reflect on the lyrics, the messages of struggle and resistance. From iconic musicians from Bob Marley and Burning Spear to the Mighty Sparrow and the Mighty Gabby, from Nina Simone and Sam Cooke to Fela, Miriam Makeba and Hugh Masekela, from Bobby Wine and Alpha Blondy to Celia Sanchez, Ruben Blades, and the Bookman Experience of Haiti. So one may ask, why such a digital Pan-African network and why now? First, we are approaching the end of the UN's decade for people of African descent. So it is imperative that we do this before the decade ends. And secondly, we are at a moment in global politics where the entire Black world of nations, communities, and families will be forced to confront the rise of neo-fascism and white nationalism around the world. This growth in autocracies is augmented by an international right-wing network of white supremacists that stretches from Putin in Moscow to Trump in Mar-a-Lago, from Bolsonaro in Brazil to Orban in Hungary, a network of racist tyrants and autocrats who harbor visions of inflicting horrendous harms on Black and brown people around the world. Theirs is a racialized agenda of global domination and oppression, primarily of non-white others, so to speak, and of refugees and immigrants from the global South. Today, international white supremacy is supported by powerful disinformation media machines like Fox News and Russia Today and many others, which broadcast lies, fabrications, distortions of reality, and all manner of bizarre conspiracies to millions of people around the clock all over the world. It therefore becomes imperative that people of African descent around the world understand this existential threat and are prepared to confront it by upholding the principles of popular and participatory democracy and by strengthening international solidarity across geographical, linguistic, and cultural divides. It is within this context that we have created the Black World Media Network, with multiple platforms, all designed to inform, educate, connect, inspire, and defend our global Black family in these perilous times. Our network will be a shield against the vile and aggressive propaganda systems of global white supremacy. We will not be the mouthpiece of any government, state, or any political party, but we will operate as a politically independent network, supporting a global Pan-Africanist movement that's rooted in progressive civil society groups in Africa, Black America, the Caribbean, Latin America, and in Black diaspora communities in North America and Europe. Accurate, timely, and credible information is a tool of empowerment and is essential for the exercise of self-determination at the local, national, and international levels. So we've just got started, sisters and brothers, in building this network, and we promise there's much more to come. And tonight we invite you all to join us in expanding and strengthening the Black World Media Network in the weeks and the months ahead. Let us seize the time and embrace this historic opportunity. Forward ever in Pan-African solidarity. Thank you, Dr. Daniels.
Yes, I told you, we have a true revolutionary in our midst. What an incredibly powerful statement. And this is the legacy project, not in a sentimental way, of the iconic Don Rojas. This is his legacy project, which means it is our legacy project, which means it is a Pan-African project. And but to simplify it again, among the objectives of tonight's program, which is an example of that, is to take the Black History Month USA and to raise the question, why not make it a Pan-African Day of global African history? And our panelists, as we introduce them, will explain to you why. But that is a strategic objective. Well, now, in order to also give a perspective on the topic of today, what better person than the son of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey to drop in with a video insert. He's also the founder of, would you believe it, Garvey Television. Garvey Television has been launched. And by the way, as many people have noted, talked to Hakeem Mighty Booty today, he was pointing out we are also fighting like hell for the cleansing the name of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, to see that he's exonerated as one of the first victim of U.S. COINTELPRO under J. Edgar Hoover. So we are now ready to hear from our brother, Dr. Julius Garvey, who's not just the son of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He holds his legacy and in his own right is a formidable global Pan-African leader. So let's just hear now from Dr. Julius Garvey.
It is indeed a pleasure for me to be here and to be part of this particular seminar looking at a Global African History Month. It is also a statement relative to the Black World Media Network. We are focusing also on Carter G. Woodson, as he was the initiator of the Negro Week, Negro History Week. Carter G. Woodson in 1933 wrote his famous book, The Miseducation of the Negro, based on his experiences and opinions after being an educator for 40 years. At the same time, in establishing the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, along with others, he participated in the founding of Negro History Week. He criticized the current educational system as one that imparts information to be memorized, but does not teach critical thinking. Therefore, so-called educated people are ill-equipped to deal with the problems that face them and simply perpetuate the regime that educated them. He said, and I quote, "The white man, if he wants to hold on to it, let him do so. But the Negro should develop and carry out an educational program." of his own. He further stated that the current educational system was worked out in conformity with the needs, desires, and thoughts of those who had enslaved and colonized us. Therefore, the Negroes taught the same religion, economics, philosophy, history, and literature would have their minds brought under the control of the oppressor. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. He will find his proper place. As a matter of fact, he will also hate himself and those like him, aspiring to be like his oppressor. His education makes it necessary. So the educated Negro is of no use to his race. We can look at the history of Africa since independence in the 60s to learn lessons of miseducation. And we can see the assassination of people like Lumumba in the Congo, Sylvanus Olympia in the Togo, Samora Machel in Mozambique, Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso, coups against Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, Mugabe in Zimbabwe. And in the last 20 years, coups in the Sudan, Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Chad, Mauritania, Guinea, Niger, Tunisia, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, etc. All led by Africans, educated at the Sorbonne, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, Stanford, Sandhurst, West Point, etc. So neocolonialism is perpetrated not by the colonizers, but by Africans who have been miseducated by the colonizers and continue to carry out the wishes of their slave masters and colonizers. As Marcus Garvey said, we must liberate our minds from mental slavery, because whilst others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. He further said, a people without the knowledge of their past origins, history, and culture is like a tree without roots. He also said, education is the medium by which the people are prepared for the creation of their own particular civilization and the advancement and glory of their own race. So we need a global African History Month. Indeed, every day needs to be Africa Day, where we know our history and practice the Nguzo Saba, which is our cultural heritage. Marcus Garvey said, wake up, Africa. Let us work towards the one glorious end of a free, redeemed, and mighty nation. Let Africa be a bright star among the constellation of nations. So we must educate ourselves and we must educate others. That's the only way we can redeem Africa and African people. Thank you very much.
Well, we thank you very much, Dr. Julius Garvey. What a powerful, strong statement on his part. And of course, we're honoring Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And we did so because I remember Dr. Maulana Karenga talking about the fact that we're subject sometimes to having historical amnesia. we tend to forget a lot for whatever reason. Maybe it's because of trauma or whatever. So we want to thank our sister Nana Anoa Nantambu, who is I think the president emeritus, I hope I'm getting it right, of the National Association of Black Social Workers in New Orleans, who actually helped us to organize a major forum on reparations a couple of years ago where Danny Glover and, in fact, Professor Beckles, you were there for that occasion as well. So Absolutely. She is the one who wrote and sang that beautiful tribute to Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So we just want to give her a big shout out and thank her for that contribution. Now we also, least we forget, and we're not going to forget. And one of the things I say is, I'm not into drugs and all of that, but There's one thing we can't OD on. That's history and culture. As African people, we can never OD on history and culture. So I've also asked, and maybe there'll be some duplication, but that'll be good. Repetition, they say, is good. I've also asked Dr. Maulana Karenga, who is the chair of the Black Studies Department of Cal State University, Long Beach, and he has so many titles, but to me, he is the creator of Kwanzaa, and that is one of the most magnificent, extraordinary contributions of our people of all time. And so I've asked Dr. Maulana Karenga if he too would reflect on and share with us the life and legacy of Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Dr. Karenga, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel. I'm very glad to be here and at this historic moment. So Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the founder of Black History Month, born 1875, made transition in Ascension 1950, rose up from the evil and debilitating depths of post-Holocaust segregation and suppression to point a new way to understand and assert ourselves in history and the world. An activist scholar, he embraced the African concept that possessing knowledge carries with it an ethical obligation to share it and to use it in the advancement of good in the world. Therefore, he spent his life teaching and institution building to share his knowledge, empower his people, and to continue to contribute to the reconception and reconstruction of history and society in the interests of truth, justice, and social transformation. Dr. Woodson wanted us to understand ourselves in an expansive way, to conceive of African history as central to US history and the history of the world. He wanted us to see it as a winding way to understand and assert ourselves from a unique and fruitful vantage point. Furthermore, Dr. Woodson, like Dr. W.B. Du Bois and Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune and other educators and leaders of that era, believed that white folks were essentially racist because of ignorance about Black people and illusions of superiority about themselves. He believed that exposing them to a massive dose of mind-opening evidence of history would free them from such unawareness and illusions and make us and the world safer and freer in the process. Dr. Woodson earned his PhD in history from Harvard University in 1912. And he was not simply a historian, but also a teacher who had taught in public school and knew the value and transforming power of education. Raised by parents who had been born and lived during the unrelenting radical evil of the Holocaust of enslavement, and having grown up in the midst of the savagery of segregation himself, he also values freedom and democracy and resolutely resisted the racist constraints which prevented and perverted them. He would teach freedom by freeing the mind, cultivating a life of the mind that grounded and enhanced in dignity affirming and life enhancing ways how African people understood and asserted themselves in the world. He wanted us to understand and act with the knowledge imparted by ancient ancestors, the ancient Egyptians. And this was that we are not just in history, we are history. And given that, they said, every day is a donation to eternity, and even 1 hour is a contribution to the future. Therefore, he began to develop a comprehensive strategy with historical calculation with historical education as its centerpiece to achieve several educational and social goals. His overall strategy then was first sought to elevate and expand Black historical knowledge and self-consciousness, and to teach the rich resource and reward of history. Second, to critique and correct the falsification and misconception of Black history. Third, to critique and correct white racist consciousness and self-congratulatory conceptions of history. Fourth, to integrate Black history in the educational system and social lives of the people. And finally, five, to use this process in the interest of remaking America and expanding the realm of freedom and democracy. Woodson's conception of history is comprehensive and inclusive, and prefigures and influences the Kawita conception of history as a source of lessons, victorious spirit, models of human excellence, and the obligation to remember and advance the ancient and ongoing legacy of our ancestors. To disseminate his message and make Black history an accessible resource for everyone, he trained teachers, started history study club, used the media, taught, lectured, wrote letters and sent literature, wrote extensively and published scholarly and popular books and articles, involved community elders, and encouraged documentation and activities of remembrance and reinforcement. Also to expand his work and encourage other scholars, professionals, and laypersons to participate in his project, he created several institutions and organs. Dr. Woodson formed the Association for the Study of Negro, now African American Life and History in 1915 for the express purpose, I quote, the collection of sociological and historical data on Black people, the study of peoples of African blood, and publishing books in this field, and the promotion of harmony between the races, unquote. In 1916, he edited and published the first issue of the Journal of Negro History, which he defined, quote, as a quarterly scientific magazine committed to publishing scholarly research and documents on the history and cultures of Africa, and perhaps of the peoples of African descent around the world. So Africa and the peoples of African descent around the world. In 1926, Dr. Woodson inaugurated the celebration of Negro History Week. He noted in an article in the Journal of Negro History explaining the importance of the study and dissemination of Black history, that it was designed to teach the meaning and achievements of Black people and ensure Black people not become, quote, a negligible factor in the thought of the world. Dr. Woodson also established the Negro History Bulletin in 1937 to increase readership among Black public school teachers, the working class persons and youth, as well as lay persons in general. Again, his stress was on maximum outreach and engagement. Dr. Woodson was especially concerned, as he expressed in the title of the content of his classic work, The Miseducation of the Negro in 1933, which he reasoned was caused by bad history and cultivated historical amnesia. For him, the historical and social education of Black people was directed toward disorientation and domination and designed to control Black people's thinking and deprive them of the capacity for independent thought and self-determination. In a classic assertion in this text, he notes that if you control a person's thinking and cultivate a sense of inferiority, quote, you would not need to tell him to go to the back door. He would go without being told. And if there's no black door, he was to have one cut for his special benefit, unquote. Likewise, for Dr. Woodson, the practice of freedom begins in the mind and ultimately fulfills itself in liberating action. Thus, Dr. Woodson's historical project was not simply, quote, vindicationist or, quote, contributionist, as is usually argued. Rather, it was emancipatory, freeing, liberating, both as a critique and corrective, directed toward freedom from mental and social constraint and new ways to understand, interpret, and make history. In an essay in the Negro History Bulletin in 1940, Dr. Woodson challenged Africans to dare greatness and emulate the deeds of their ancestors. He said, to you then comes a challenge of what you would do in building upon the foundation they have laid, unquote. He noted that in spite of the hardships, oppression, and discrimination that confronted them, Black people have, quote, disappointed the prophets who said that they would be exterminated. And on the contrary, they enrolled themselves among the great, unquote. He then asked, what will we do in our time with more advantages and more access? And he states, quote, if we do not take hold where they left off and advance further in the service of truth and justice, we are unworthy to claim descent from such a noble people, unquote. This is our challenge, and it cannot be changed or left to chance, but can be met only by self-consciously taking our history in our own hand and directing it toward good and expansive ends in the interest of African and human good and the well-being of the world. In a word, this is our task then, to know our history and honor it, to engage our present and improve it, and to imagine a whole new future and to forge it in the most ethical, effective, and expansive ways.
All right. I hope y'all don't get, but we don't want you to get, well, you can get, you can't get too high off of that, right? So you can soar, all right, giving that tribute. And it is important to know our history. It is important to know those who made these contributions. And even as we celebrate our Black History Month, we were sensitive to the fact that very often people really don't know enough about Dr. Carter G. Woodson. So that was an extraordinary 101. Now we want to move to the introduction of our panelists. Actually, I was supposed to do that first and then go here, but then I got the Holy Ghost up in here and I'm getting a little disoriented, but that's okay because we're going to have a magnificent conversation and we want you to be a part of it. We're going to have a panel discussion on this issue of towards Global African History Month, expanding history, Black History Month in Black America to Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and the diaspora as a Pan-African project. And we're going to discuss the meaning of this. What does it mean? What is it about? Is this a relevant undertaking? And if so, why? And it's going to be a real outstanding conversation. You've already met Dr. Maulana Karenga, who is one of our panelists, of course. I'd like to also indicate that we were hoping to have Dr. Afia S. Zakiya, president of African Heritage Studies Association, who is an ecologist and global water and sanitation and hygiene public health expert from Atlanta, Georgia, but spent many years in Ghana and on the continent. But unfortunately, just before, about an hour before we started, she just said, I'm not feeling well. I've been trying to get myself up to it, but wanting to represent her people appropriately, she asked that she be excused for this evening, and we certainly want to do that. But we want to thank her for being willing to participate in any event. We're delighted to be joined by Professor Hilary Beckles. He is the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, and translation of in these parts of North America, that means he be the president of the University of the West Indies, the whole University of the West Indies, right? But he's also the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and we work very closely with him by way of the National African American Reparations Commission. Next up, we have the dynamic Dr. Claire Nelson, founder and president of the Institute of Caribbean Studies, and ideation leader of the Futures Forum from Washington, DC. Next, another one who needs no introduction, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. I have, by Kuja Chagalia, Ron Daniels style, anointed him our paramount chief. Dr. Leonard Jeffries is a professor emeritus of Black Studies at City College, City University of New York, a Pan-African educator of global renown. Welcome, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. We're also joined by a dynamic sister, scholar and activist who was recommended to us by actually Dr. Zakiya, but she also works, has done some work with Dr. Claire Nelson as well. So they got a nice little triumvirate going up in here in terms of the work that they do. And we know that if they're associated, if she's associated with them, we know she is a bad sister. And so that is Dr. Maya Viola. I'm gonna let her say it. Professor Okome. I got that part right, and now she can correct it for me. But anyway, she because I have a hard time getting that out of words, and that's my miseducation is crippling me. But she is professor of political science and African and women's studies and past women's studies program director at Brooklyn College in the City University of New York here in the People's Republic of Brooklyn, and we look forward to hearing from her. And finally, we had hoped to hear from Pierre Sané. We were not able to actually connect with him. He must be off somewhere on a retreat, but he is a formidable person, and we know that it was, in fact, a part of this was his idea. It was a part of our discussions with him. He is the founder and president of Images Africa and the former Secretary General of Amnesty International. We had hoped that he would join us from Dakar, Senegal, but he is not here to do so. Now, brothers and sisters and friends, we're going to have a conversation. We have three basic questions that we're going to ask our audience to deliberate on. I will sort of give them a nudge if they're sort of spending a little bit too long, because we have people who can orate excellently for on and on and on, but we also want to leave some space for you and the audience to put into the chat questions that you may have as well. And so we want to proceed with that in mind. So at this stage, I want to start the conversation. Our first question is, from your perspective, because we're not limiting people, we want to hear everyone's perspective on these questions. What are the manifestations of Dr. Carter G. Woodson's proposition regarding the miseducation of the Negro throughout the Pan-African world? How does it manifest itself in Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and other regions of the diaspora? And we turn now first to Dr. Claire Nelson, and she is a futurist for sure. Dr. Claire Nelson.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this conversation about where we go and should a Global African History Month be part of our journey forward. I think a manifestation for me might be expressed, first of all, in a memory of my 13-year-old self in Jamaica at St. Jude's High School for Girls, being sent to the principal's office for falling asleep in class and having the nerve to respond when woken up and told that the class was very important, you know? You have to learn about these things, heather on the Scottish moors. To which I responded in my righteous indignation, heather on the Scottish moors? I can't even name the plants in the schoolyard. So I was sent to the principal's office. The principal's office seen me coming huffing and puffing with steam coming out my nose and out my ears, sent me to the library to cool down. In the library, I'm reading the Encyclopedia Britannica. And it says that Homo sapiens sapien, the Negroid ape, was descended from a lower class of ape than the Caucasian. So by the time I got back to the principal's office, there was more steam coming from every part of my body. I said to the principal in a rough voice, I demand that this be removed from the library at once. At which point, a brilliant person as she was, she sent me back to my class without any punishment. And I use that to say that that sort of embedded, right, miseducation in terms of the books, our understanding, our definitions have brought us to a point where too many of us are still stupid. So even though we have moved, for example, in Africa and the Caribbean from a general Cambridge examination model, and so we now have Caribbean history, I think we still, in some ways, at the body, mind, and soul level, find ourselves embedded in a consciousness that thinks that at the base we remain savage, trivial in some ways. Africa did not provide any indigenous knowledge. It was worthless. All knowledge came from the civilization of the colonizers. There's no history of Black people before we were captured and civilized by them. Uncultured, Black culture is only primitive. After all, we didn't even have a written alphabet. Pathetic, or even worse, pitiful. In other words, we have, or even worse, sometimes they're perfidious. We're untrustworthy, deceitful, and so all these ideas remain in the substrate of the way we live our lives. So we don't trust each other, crabs in a barrel mentality. And so we actually believe these things as if they were true because they're embedded in some of the books, some of the ways in which we've been taught, some of the words which we were used to describe our cultures, our countries. And so I think today, when we look at where we are facing a global pandemic, and we see, for example, the lack of trust in the system to fund at the same level of finance research on African traditional and Caribbean traditional herbal remedies, which have been in use for treating lung problems, right? We see that there's still this idea that certain ways in which African knowledge and science, etc., is expressed is not worthy. So I'm going to pause there and let the floor go on.
All right, wonderful, wonderful. We turn now to Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, your perspective on this question.
Thank you, Ron, and thank you, Don. Respect to Carter G and of course Marcus G. And it's good to see everyone. Karenga, wonderful to hear you, and of course Claire and Don. A tremendous honor to be with you. My story is a little different, I suspect, to Claire's at a personal level. I remember being in high school in Barbados at the age of 11, and we had a visiting history teacher. This was a young man who had studied somewhere in Latin America because he spoke Spanish, and we had never heard Spanish before. But he came to give us a guest lecture in our high school, and he spoke about Toussaint Louverture and described this black man on a horse liberating his people. Now, I have never forgotten that. That is an image that blew my mind. I really had my mind blown by this discourse of this black man on a horse called Toussaint Louverture. And the way he described it, and we were children, and we were living on sugar plantations, and our parents and grandparents were working for white men. And it was always a white man on a horse. And our image was, as children, were of white men on horses driving our parents in labor. That was our icon of segregation, degradation. White men on horses driving our parents to work and extracting value out of them, 12 hours a day of pitifully paid labor. But this Toussaint story absolutely transformed my consciousness. And I went on through high school in the UK, but I could never get this image of this black revolutionary on a horse out of my mind. And I don't know how that happened, but let me tell you, I knew what the problem was as a child. I felt it. And when I heard this teacher talking about Toussaint, life was never the same for me. I was a very different human being thereafter. But I think the fundamental problem, my own personal case notwithstanding, was precisely this. It is the historical schism between the experiences of our people, what our people went through, their day-to-day historical experience, and the inability of our scholars to write about it, to narrate it, to convert our experience into education. I think that was the fundamental problem. It took us quite a while, I would say maybe over 100 years, to narrow that gap between what our people were living every day, the resilience, the struggle, the consciousness, the art of survival, the art of fighting for freedom and justice, and living that world every day across the Black world, and not having that experience converted into education, into literature, into text. And that is the background, I think, to what Carter G was talking about. It wasn't that we didn't know our history. We knew it because we lived it, and it was passed on from generation to generation through the family, through the experience. But the collective consciousness that emerged out of that experience, it was a long time coming to see that written down in textbooks and in literature. It was a long time coming. And now we're seeing it in film. Now we've gone through the narrative of closing the gap between experience and education and literature. We are now seeing film. And I hope that one day before I die, I see that major global blockbuster on the Haitian Revolution, that black man on a horse, liberating the world. Why is Hollywood so afraid of that? Every revolution in the world has been treated by Hollywood, Bollywood, or some major film. Why are they so mortally afraid of that black man on a horse who blew my mind? You know, and I think they know why they're afraid of that. So I would say, therefore, Ron, that the legacy aspect there was not that we were incapable. We were so marginalized from the educational system that we could not get those opportunities to see our journey, the struggle for justice, to see survival, the history of our women, family, children, to have all of that narrated and to fill out the shelves of libraries so that everyone can read about it and use it for all kinds of purposes. That was really the legacy aspect of it. And I can tell you, because I knew that to be true, again, in my own case, I am never more balanced. I am never more relaxed. I am never more alive than when I'm writing a book. You know, as I finish one, I'm on to the next, because I have this understanding that this gap between experience and education, between living and literature, that gap has to be absolutely closed 100%. And that is what is driving many of us who are researchers and teachers to make sure we have a legacy of literature on every aspect of our lives, our history, so that no generation in the future can ever say, we did not know, because the text is alive and it's there. So that is my take on that, Ron. And I would like to speak later on this Global Africa Month concept. I hope I have an opportunity to return to that.
Well, you most certainly will have that opportunity to do so. I'd like to turn now to Professor Nakomi, because I know on the African continent, this is not a problem. I know that people are having gained power and presidents and all that. I just know that there is robust African-centered education on the African continent. So just talk to us in your own perspective about what it is you see. And you have such a great reputation for the struggles and battles that you're fighting in the history of our people. So it would be great to just hear your perspective.
I think I'd have to disappoint you. And, you know, just to talk about my name again, it's Mojuba Olu. And I omitted my middle name, Olufunke Okome. Well, you know, I think that what we see in the diaspora is also present in the continent. And if one is wondering why Africa is the richest continent and the wealth of Africa does not belong to the Africans, I think miseducation is a huge part of it. And that miseducation is not just about education, it's about the structure of the world we live in and the imperialism that empowers white domination and also facilitated colonization. So that exploitation was made possible with the kind of education that was favored. And I think that remains still dominant even in the continent. I went to school at a time when speaking vernacular was punished. Vernacular, by the way, was your mother tongue. So you spoke your mother tongue and you got punished because your job, my country, Nigeria, was colonized by the British. Your job was to learn English and to learn to speak it well. And so cleansing you of your mother tongue was part of the educational process. So that gives you an idea of the way in which education essentially meant becoming Europeanized. So you could be a citizen of the world, but that world did not incorporate Africa in any kind of meaningful way, except as a place that was plundered and, you know, kind of overexploited. So the way African history is taught in Africa itself, I think remains problematic. Of course, they are beacons of light. There are places. I went to University of Ibadan, and I was privileged to learn from people who foregrounded Africa, but that's not always the case. And it's still a struggle. There was even a time in Nigeria when they banned teaching history in the K to 12 schools, if you can imagine that. And there had to be a struggle to restore the teaching of history. So we still have an educational system in the continent that is very colonial. And you can see from some of the struggles of the young people in the continent that are calling, the roads must fall in South Africa, calls for the decolonization of education, that this is still a struggle that we have to fight to decolonize our educational system. You can see it in the standards of beauty that people have. You can see it in people who are bleaching their skin, you can see the way in which the academy has this hierarchy of knowledge and the way in which the academy is colonized space, because white dominance is valorized. And, just think about those university rankings that they do. Which universities tend to be ranked the highest, and which ones tend to be seen as the bastions of knowledge, and who are the people who are regarded as authorities in all our disciplines? So I see a struggle that still needs to be fought. And, I also see it, when people are called experts and people are quoting and citing people in literature, who are they citing? Who are they quoting? Who are the gatekeepers? The whole production of knowledge is like a mafia. And it's a mafia that is dominated by white people and the people that they kind of want to let in. And, there's that whole concept about white allies that people need in order to make progress and stuff. So the African continent has a lot of potential. And that potential, as far as I'm concerned, is yet to be attained. There's a lot of struggle we have to do to cleanse our educational systems from the vestiges of colonialism, because only then would we be able to take charge of our own lives, write our history in the contextualized ways that we need to write it. And also, I like the concept of removing the gap between scholars and the people whose stories they're trying to tell. The whole town and gown divide that you have in African countries, it needs to be eliminated. So education for what? What is it that we want to accomplish? How does that education enable us to understand ourselves, to understand where we want to go in this world and how we want to get there? The minute we start doing that in a thoroughgoing way all through the continent, we would have made the huge step towards decolonization. So for me, we have a lot of book knowledge. We have very bright people, very hardworking, but we are yet to decolonize.
Oh, wow. Well, this is really, really, really everything that we had hoped for. To those of you who are joining us on our various platforms, you're listening to a forum on the subject of towards Global African History Month. Expanding history, Black History Month in Black America to Africa, the Caribbean, Central and South America, and the diaspora as a Pan-African project. And you are hearing from some of the brightest and best in the African world, right, tonight. And so we just want to let you know what you're listening to on our various platforms out there as we proceed. Now, I want to turn now to our Paramount Chief, because you travel all over the world, all over the diaspora. And, one of the things that I was sharing, we were talking to somebody about, maybe it was Dr. Nelson and whatever, it's just it's just fascinating to me that in the 21st century, we have people in government, we have jurists who are African, and they still are walking around in powdered wigs. You know, I mean, with them, it's like, and if you dare touch them, it's like, you know, it's like they're ready to fight you over this powdered wig. And one of the issues I remember being, had the privilege of speaking at the watch night service in Antigua a couple of years ago at the request of the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission unit or chapter in commission in Antigua, Brother Dobreen. And what was being talked about was the fact that there was resistance in the government. The government was resistant to this idea of providing an African-centered education, which is mind-boggling to me. I didn't quite understand why it was or is the case. So Dr. Leonard Jeffries, our paramount chief, and let me just quote or paraphrase something that Dr. Betty Shabazz once said. She said, "We may be oppressed, but we do not have to cooperate with our oppressors." A very basic statement that she made. So I'm wondering what's going on in terms of this miseducation that's happening all over the world. What is this? How do you see it? Dr. Leonard Jeffries, you have the floor, sir.
Certainly, family, it's a great pleasure for me to join with all of you at this magnificent occasion. And I want to give my special thank you to Dr. Ron Daniels, who has been at the forefront of these great movements that we've been involved in, and even had nerve enough to put his hat in the ring for the presidential process. And so that we're dealing with some outstanding revolutionary figures. I'm looking at Don Rojas, sitting back as the elder, but you know, he's a rebel with a cause. You cannot separate the New Jew movement and the struggles in the Caribbean from this gentleman sitting back now as if he is just relaxing. And certainly Sir Hillary does not know that when he had nerve enough to run into Westminster, one of the key spots in the English world, and talking about reparations, and I said, oh my God, he's going to get killed. I wanted to transform myself into an African protective figure and fly in there and stand next to him and say, "Dare, don't touch my brother. He's got it right." And so we've got to understand this family relationship we have, which is an enormous one. And Dr. Maulana, he is talking about his great works and the works of others, but he goes back with me, not just to us and the family in Los Angeles, but he goes into the streets of my hometown, Newark, New Jersey. He brought his team, his consciousness, his spirit into Newark, a rough town, but a town that was ready to be a part of this larger struggle. And so he helped Amiri Baraka, who I went to high school with. Of course, he was a few years ahead of me. But Amiri Baraka was trying to get out of the cultural bag that he was in and out of this integrated thing in the village. And then, but Maulana helped him come right back home to his space. And they developed a committee to unify Newark and all kinds of other things, and eventually the Black Power Conference. And so we have to see each other as vehicles for our enormous success, and we have been successful. The prime example is our brother here, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop. Now, some of you are in a little difficulty with Sheikh Anta because you're limited with your language skills, in other words. But I was fortunate as a young person in Newark, New Jersey, studying French. Je parle très bien le français, presque comme le français. En effet, mes études de doctorat étaient faites dans la langue française. In other words, when it comes to laying out that language, I'm there, and I was glad to be able to come in with the victory. This is Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, and he is an extraordinary figure in terms of revolution, a permanent revolution of the mind, the spirit, the body. And he had a special space in this struggle for us. We did not know it, but he had the best education that you can get in Senegal from the traditional structure, the Marids. So he had that education. He had the best education as a teenager that the French give to their own, because they wanted the Senegalese to be in the vanguard of their imperialism. So they trained the Senegalese better than the people in France got training. And then he had a chance after the end of the war to go to France. And he landed in Marseille in southern France, where there was a radical tradition of Marxism and other thoughts and ideas. So he had a chance to touch all of these areas and make it a part of him. And the greatest part of him, as far as I'm concerned, because I don't want to tell my age, although I did have my 85th birthday last week, 85, y'all, still alive. It ain't about no jive. 85. But in 1959-60, I had won an international Rotary Fellowship to study in Europe. And so where was I? 1959 in Switzerland. But Spirit told me, go to Paris. And I said, I haven't lost anything in Paris. I've been to Paris many a time, and I don't need nothing on Champs-Élysées. I don't need nothing, none of the women in Pigalle. I don't need any of the this and the that here and there. But Spirit said, go to Paris. And I listened to Spirit. And in 1959, I got on the night train that left Lausanne. It hit Geneva within a few minutes, and then we're going under Mont Blanc. And when we come out of Mont Blanc, we're in Marseille. We're in southern France, Lyon. And then you take a train from Lyon into Paris. And I had a chance to go right into where I needed to go. Spirit had said, go to the student quarter, the university quarter. Go to where the real knowledge is taking place. And so I wound up going there at the time that Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop was defending his dissertation. For the third time, he was defending a dissertation. But his partner, his senior, Alioune Diop, was prepared this time around. And there were thousands of us in the streets on Rue des Écoles, the street of schools. At one end, you have a pillared temple, and that's the Champs-Élysées. And that's where the higher education in the French tradition is. But if you go down the street of the Collège de France, you come to where the undergraduate degree is given. And in between the Sorbonne, their great educational institution, and the Collège de France, where the undergraduate degrees were given, you had the seat of this African think tank Alioune Diop had established with his beautiful wife, a think tank to take on the European world. And so there I was with thousands of others, hoping that Sheikh Anta would finally get accepted. Alioune was taking any chances. He had dozens, 100 or so professors from around the French tradition to be there to make a judgment on whether Sheikh Anta was successful or not. You have to understand how these historical things work. And the first book that I purchased of Sheikh Anta Diop was a book dealing with the establishment of the foundations of nation building. And I needed that because within a year or so, I was back in the States working on my PhD. And so what was the PhD? It was on the economic development in Africa. The master's was on the
So Dr. Jeffries, what would you say is the critical lesson of your journey in relationship to your meeting Sheikh Anta Diop?
It's about a family affair. And, you know, we put that in song, but he made sure that we understood this family affair. So this great brother dedicated this great work of his, Civilization and Barbarism, to Alioune Diop. And that's why we have to not find conflicts with each other, find our way to pull together and make our message clear. I dedicate this book to the memory of Alioune Diop, who died on the battlefield of African culture. African culture, Dr. Maulana, do you hear that? African culture, the battlefield of African culture. Alioune, you knew what you came to this on this earth to do. A life entirely and dedicated to others, nothing for yourself, everything for others, a heart filled with goodness and generosity, a soul steeped in nobility, a spirit always serene, simplicity personified. Did the Demerge, the beginning of the earth, want to provide us with an example of an ideal of perfection by calling you into existence? Alas, the terrestrial community to which you knew how to convey better than anyone else the message of human truthfulness that sprang from the innermost depths of your being was deprived of you too soon. But the remembrance of you will never be erased from the memory of African peoples to whom you dedicated your life. That is why I am dedicating this book to your memory in witness of a brotherly friendship that is stronger than time. Check out the Diop, Dakar, Senegal.
Right.
That's
Thank you so much. That really helps to set the tone and to get that sense of history and the importance of the familyness and this collective, Ujima, collective work and responsibility in terms of moving forward. Now, what I'm going to do is collapse the last two questions because we really do want to leave some time for the audience to, and you'll have more time to talk and to share based on the questions that are in the chat. So I want to collapse the last two questions together because they're similar questions. And those questions are, in what ways might an initiative or campaign to create global African history might be useful in addressing the lack of African-centered history in regions of the Pan-African world, which is connected to the question of what strategies should be employed to effectively advance this Pan-African project. I am going to return again to lead us off with our futurists, our self-confessed and indeed great futurists, and we'll go right down the line and everyone will get an opportunity. Well, Dr. Claire Nelson, would you lead off with a crisp, succinct sort of notion of those two questions?
Well, I'm going to try. I'd like to say, first of all, to what end and to what purpose? We are at a nexus of really the potential to self-destruct, right? We're at a place where humanity can self-destruct. Between climate change, synthetic biology, AI, there are many amount of things that we're engaged with right now is really demanding that any attempt to look back at your history must be for the purpose of creating the ground or cultivating the ground for the future we want. So I like to work with the idea of the Sankofa principle, right? We go back and fetch what we need. And some of what we need from maybe looking at history are some of the values that might help us to recalibrate some of the metrics we have to calibrate differently if we're to become successful. Africa cannot educate itself or create a model of education that is designed to replicate the West. And so when I see future cities being designed looking exactly like Dubai or New York or Manhattan, I get very nervous because it means that that decolonization process that Professor Okome is talking about is not in our mindset. So the purpose of any such global African History Month movement process has to be grounded perhaps, and I think we could consider this, in using it as a vehicle for articulating the vision for the AU 2063 experiment. I say this because the African Union in its charter had said there should be a 6th constituency of Africa, right? And many of the new movements today don't remember that lots of flurry of things that we were doing in the 90s. I was going to Barbados, the Prime Minister's office there, and South Africans were going, a lot of movement was happening. And then we had the World Conference on Racism, and then padam, everything mashed down, right? So we're now, it's almost like we're starting over, but we're not really starting over from scratch. So even the recent history of that Africa Union project can inform us to say, okay, Africa is beginning to make room for the Joseph tribe, so to speak, to return. And therefore, our history as Pan-African people, whether it be ancient pre-colonial Africa, whether it be the colonial experiment starting from that Berlin period, and then current history, quote unquote, right, needs to be taught in a way that we use that information to recalibrate some metrics, the way the rule books that we live under are written, and all of the things we need to debunk the causal layer of why Africa unity seems a far-fetched idea. And so I think we have the beginnings of that. And so if this experiment of this Global African Month project, whichever month is chosen or whichever trope you decide to go forward with, I think has to be grounded that it's for purpose. And I suggest we look then at the AU 2063, which is 40 years away, as a justification for saying we need to understand these critical things so we can rewrite the metrics, right? Designed for a new sustainable system for Africa, ensuring that all the agents, this is my smart future, that all the agents in the system have a voice, ensuring that we're then using that history to uncork ways of being resilient for the future. And finally, to ensure that we're looking at how we as a people have always created technology, including spiritual technology, and so juxtapose a new consciousness against the transhumanist philosophy that is beginning to take up airwaves as the only way of the future human is to become transhumanist. We have to offer another vision.
All right.
Wow.
Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, you were eager to get in on this question, and we certainly want to make sure you are in an ideal place to elaborate ideas, and as you said before, trying to close that gap between lived experience and the articulation of such in literature and in writing and whatever. So your ideas about how we can, sort of deal globally. We certainly continue to need to do it here in the US, but how do we take this project and make it an effective tool in the 21st century?
Thank you, Brother Ron. And I wish to articulate a story of a project on which I am deeply involved at this time. 10 years ago, UNESCO invited me to Addis to participate in a critique and a review of the the general history of Africa project. You may recall that UNESCO had invested a tremendous amount of resources into producing this general history of Africa project, and 8 magisterial volumes have been published. Now, these 8 volumes of the UNESCO General History of Africa are absolutely magnificent. But we were gathered in Addis to review those 8 volumes and to participate in a strategy to enable other countries to fund the continuation of that project. Now, my argument in Addis was this: we celebrate all of those magnificent African historians who have worked to decolonize the history of Africa and have produced these remarkable volumes. And some of you would have those volumes, like each one is like 1,000 pages. And UNESCO had gathered together all of the really outstanding historians across Africa to research and write these eight volumes. And now we were doing volume 9. So I celebrated all of my colleagues from South Africa all the way to Libya who had written these great poems. And I said, however, I'm from the Caribbean, I'm from the diaspora, I'm from the Americas, and I have a problem. And my problem is that these volumes are all written about the Africans at home. There are magnificent volumes on the African people in Africa at home. How about the rest of us? And I pose that fundamental question, how about the rest of us? How about all of these Africans who are scattered all over the world, in the Middle East and Asia and China and Australasia and the Americas? How about Europe? How about the rest of us? These 8 volumes are written on the assumption that the moment you stepped off the continent, the moment you either got on a ship or an airplane or whatever mode of transportation, the moment you left that continent, you have stepped outside of your history. You are no longer part of African history. You are now an outsider in respect of that history. You have been alienated from your own history. And I said, I have a problem with that, because I can tell you that the millions of African peoples who were scattered across the world, they did not think that they had stepped out of their history. They were in the mainstream of their history in another geography. So yes, you are in another place, but your consciousness is connected to the source of your belonging. And we historians need to understand that. So I celebrated the 85 African professors who had written those volumes. But I said, listen, we have to begin. So my recommendation is that volume 9 in this magnificent series must be entitled Global Africa, the history.
Yes.
Now, we spent 3 days in Addis in a room with 200 historians. And we quarreled and we squabbled and we fought. But at the end of those 3 days, there was a unanimous decision that volume 9 of the global history, volume 9 of the general history of Africa will be called Global Africa, volume 9. And we were going to study the movement of Africans everywhere on this planet. Everywhere Africans have been, we're going to track that history down, we're going to talk about it. And because we have been misleading our people. Now, this is where Pan-Africanism came into critical discourse, because I was given a public lecture in Kumasi, in the heart of the Ashanti. And I was given a lecture on Ashanti rebellions in the Americas, anti-slavery rebellions that were led by the Ashantis in the Americas. And I came upon the 1763 Ashanti War in what is now today Guyana. Back then it was called Berbice. And it was led by Kofi. Kofi led that rebellion against the Dutch and against the British. They defeated them. They took possession of the colony of Berbice on the river. And halfway through that rebellion, Atta, who was Kofi's right-hand man, came into an intellectual conflict with his leader. And guess what happened? The Dutch came to King Kofi because, having taken the colony, they declared it an Ashanti kingdom. The Dutch came to King Kofi and said, listen, Guyana is a big place, man. Let us split this place. You can have half of it for your African kingdom, but we need some of it for our sugar plantations. Let's make a deal. And King Kofi was negotiating with the Dutch how to divide the territory into 2 parts. Atta, who was his military commander, said, no, king, no. We do not trust these white people. We don't trust the English. We don't trust the Dutch. We don't trust any of them. We're going to fight to the end. Total war against the Europeans. No compromise, total war. So here was a king. prepared to compromise, and his military commander was prepared to fight to the bitter end. Now, the audience at the University of Kumasi there, the Kwame Nkrumah University, I noticed that the audience was in raucous laughter. I couldn't hear my voice. I'm at the podium and I couldn't hear my own voice. And the audience were having a wonderful time laughing at this story. The Asantehene, who was the master of ceremonies, because he's the chancellor of the Kumasi University, got up from his seat and came to the podium and whispered to me. He said, listen, you are speaking about Kofi, the conflict between Kofi and Atta in Guyana in the middle of the 18th century. But the reason the audience is having a good laugh is because right now we are having presidential elections. And the incumbent president is Kofi, and the challenger is Atta. Now, all I could say was imagine 200 years later, and Kofi and Atta are still at it. Now, the remarkable thing about that was that there was no one in the audience of 1,000 people. There was no one in the audience of 1,000 people right there in Kumasi, at the heart of Ashanti, who knew that 200 years ago, the Ashantis had built a kingdom in the Guyanas and had installed a king whose name was Kofi. The children in the schools of Ghana did not know that there was a Ghanaian kingdom in the Americas. They had no idea, nobody told them. The public had no idea that the Ashantis had built this kingdom in the New World, because the historians of Africa had written the history in such a way that these Ashantis, by being placed on a slave ship and sent to the Americas, had disappeared from their history, had walked out on their history, had been disconnected forever from their history.
Right.
And I thought this was an intellectual crisis. And that is when I realized then that we have to start thinking in terms of global Africa. So let me end by saying this. It has brought a crisis into Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism is dichotomized. Here's a dichotomy: Africans at home, Africans overseas. Africa as the core, the diaspora as the periphery. Africa as the motherland, the diaspora as the adjunct. Africa as pure, the Creoles are in the diaspora. And all of these dichotomies are mythologies. It is not true. The history does not work like that. So we have to dismantle the concept of Pan-Africanism that was about the mobilization of the diaspora fighting for the liberation of the motherland. But hold on a second. All of us are fighting for global Africa. So global Africa has to be reconstructed. There are 2 million Nigerians in South Africa. They have left Nigeria. Have they walked out of their Nigerian history, or are they making new African history in South Africa? There are 2 million Caribbean folks in North America, Canada, and the US. Having left the Caribbean, have they walked out of the African Caribbean history? No, we have to stop those polarities. We have to stop this splitting up of our people. We have to say there is global African history. Africans everywhere are making this history. Let us put it back together as global Africa. So yes.
Okay, so let's put it together. Let's put it together before we consume.
Put it back together. Put it back together.
We're gonna put it back together, but we want to put it back together in a way that allows us to have some Q&A. We're eating up the Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Ron.
I'm going to now turn to our sister, Professor Akome, to offer your prescriptions, your analysis on this question of the value of the project and strategy for implemented, if you see the virtue and value in it.
We definitely need to have a global Africa embedded in our consciousness, and then we make it real. You know, when I look at all of us, I see connectedness, and I see also a lot of mutual disdain sometimes, and animosity that comes out of this miseducation. That, because the way, okay, so some of the stuff we need to do, because I don't want to go on and on, is intergenerational work where the elders connect with the youth in a very solid way. I'm so encouraged by what some of the young people are doing. The Black Lives Movement here, the roads must fall, the anti-SARS protests in Nigeria. And if you look throughout the continent, in North Africa, the what people called the Arab Spring, all those are movements that show that young people are interested in building a new reality and in challenging some of the oppressive structures that we have in place. So I think there's a need for intergenerational connection, and we need to take control of our stories and tell our own stories orally, in written forms, in digitized forms, in film, in popular culture, everywhere. And because a lot of people are making profit off the telling of our stories and the distortion of many of these stories. So we need to take charge of that. And we need to do it in all media. We also need contextualized knowledge, because it's not enough to know our history. How do we, what are the lessons we're drawing from it? What are the relevant factors that we find that would enable us to challenge many of the oppressions that we're experiencing? We also need resources. Okay, so I was very encouraged to hear about the continuation, the interest in continuing the UNESCO project, but where's the money? So a lot of times, a lot of the intellectual work, the documentation, the excavation of histories that we need to do, we do not have sufficient funding for it. So we need to have a way of generating funding so that we are autonomous in driving our agenda. I also think that we need to build and strengthen our own institutions, because, and many of the institutions that exist, they really need, well, maybe, it would be nice if we could just tear them down and build new things, but I guess that could not be easily accomplished. But so we need to rehabilitate many of our institutions so they're serving our interests instead of reifying, ideologies that oppress and marginalize us. So Pan-Africanism is actually something that if we could revive in a thoroughgoing way would help us to foster this agenda. So our work is educational, it's cultural, it's political, it's economic, and we have to unite, and there's nobody that's going to do the work for us, So we all need to kind of roll up our sleeves and find ways in which we can connect with one another to start doing this important work, because I think now it is, we're in the midst of this pandemic. Hopefully we're getting beyond it. But a lot of the lessons that we learned from this pandemic, for people who were oblivious to white dominance and the ways in which it was a destructive force, their eyes are now hopefully opened. So we should take advantage of this moment to begin to do the rebuilding that we should do. And the way we can do it, I mean, it's got to be informal as well as formal. And the African Union, I mean, I wish the African Union was more serious than it is, I like, the aspirations that it espouses are laudable. But then I don't see deep commitment and putting resources that would enable for these aspirations to be met in a very efficient and meaningful way. Given the fact that we live in a competitive world where Africa is already pushed to the margins. So Africans need to take charge, and begin to rewrite our history. African history is yet to be written. The real writing of African history would incorporate all people of African descent wherever they are in the world. And Africa that works would embrace us all wherever we are and would enable us to flourish and contribute our best to making sure that we leave a better world for the future generations, where the institutions we build nurture creativity, present us in a good light, instead of as the poor stepchildren who are, justifying our existence. So, a lot of work. We can all do it, but we have to get started and we have to be serious about it and generate some resources that enable us to do the work and do it well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that. I'm going to turn now to Dr. Karenga before we turn to our Q&A. We may have to abbreviate the Q&A a little bit, but I want to turn to Dr. Karenga to get his thoughts. I'm very excited about this because the African Union, CARICOM, we have a formation here in the United States called the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. I can see some connectivity here beginning to develop in terms of what we might look forward to next year. This has been really, really, really very vigorous, very informative. I mean, I'm learning a lot just myself, from hearing the conversation. Dr. Karenga, your perspective, sir. You're on mute.
Okay, thank you, Ron. I wanted to say, Dr. Daniels and assistant brother, that everything y'all said, I mean, I agree with. I think that one of the things, if we follow the framework that Dr. Woodson gave us, that we make this critique and then we make corrective. And one of the things that has to be dealt with is what he called, let's just say several things. Number one, the mentally enslaving education, an education that is mentally enslaving has to be dealt with, that denies the promise and practice of freedom. He said that the education is socially disabling, right? It doesn't give us the capacity to solve the problems and meet the challenges we need. He also said it was class alienating, divide the masses from those that are educated, right? He also said that it was racially self-hating, teaching us to hate ourselves. So when our colleagues talked about the bleaches and all the other things, the yellow hair and all that, that is what he was talking about. The education does that, right? And when Dr. Mojuba Okome, when she said that the people called her language vernacular and all that, that was them teaching her to hate herself, to hate and see deficiency rather than potentiality and power. And then, of course, culturally grounded. That's my thing. All of it is related, as he said, to this culture education. And by culture, we don't mean song and dance. We mean the totality of thought and practice by which a people creates itself, celebrates, sustains, and develops itself, and introduces itself to history and humanity. And so what we need then is an emancipatory education, how to free ourselves so we can be ourselves, and how to be ourselves so we can free ourselves. Understanding that we can't really free ourselves unless we be ourselves, but we can't fully be ourselves until we fully free ourselves. And then an empowering education to build Africa up to how the Honorable Marcus Garvey and all the great heroes and heroines saw Africa as a force for good in the world. Service-oriented education, right? If we build a project that does not include these, then the project won't survive. As Dr. Woodson said, Every education worth its name begins with the people and raises the level of the people. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, our whole nation is judged and has potential depending upon what power we give the people. And then, of course, it has to be dignity affirming, away from that racial head, dignity affirming, life enhancing, world preserving, right? Represent the best of what it means to be African and human in the fullest sense. And then it has to be culturally grounded, rooted in the best of African views and values. And there are 5 things that are always important for projects like this. The first is philosophical grounding. That is to say, intellectual initiative, educational initiative that define what we're actually about and that represents the best principles we have to offer the people. So this is a philosophy. We got to start with that, principles and practice. Second, structure. We have to build structures that house our aspiration and advance our interests as a people, that define, defend, and advance our interests. Programs, that's activities we have to engage in, that solidify and make concrete the teachings that we're given. And then, of course, communication, which comes now to, guess what? The Black World Media Network. We need to strengthen that network, right? We need to diversify that network, right? And we have to speak our own special culture truth, make our own unique contribution to how we reconceive and radically remake the world. And then, of course, we need resources. We have to, and again, Dr. Okome talked about that. We need the resources to do this. And we have to find some way to extract the resources for this. And so what we're trying to do here is to build a new concept of what it means to be African in the fullest sense. And it must be a world-encompassing concept. Africa the continent can always be the center, but at the same time, as I said to the people at Festac, I don't come here as a junior brother. We don't come here as junior brothers and junior sisters. We're not marginal. We're central to the project. And so what we have to do is create a concept of Pan-Africanism that does not decentralize people or marginalize people, but has everyone bringing their own special gift, speaking and contributing in ways that they're best qualified to do. That gives an enrichment. The diversity is not just a principle, it's actually a practice. People always say, we said in the 60s, I introduced a concept called operational unity. Unity in diversity, unity without uniformity, but unity in principle, purpose, and practice. That's how I see it.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Can I say this last thing?
Sure.
I wanted to send a greeting from my 2 organizations, the African American Culture Center, US, and the organization US, and the National Association of Kawaida organization, NACO.
Yes.
And we're part of this project, and we really appreciate being here.
Right. Well, we appreciate everyone who's contributed, and we're going to hear again from our Paramount Chief, and we're going to save some space for him. But I do want to go to take at least a couple of questions from the chat. Let me just remind everybody who's out there and still hanging in. I'm watching people who are hanging in, which means they are hanging on every word that is being spoken, and we want people to contribute in whatever way they can as well. That this is a Black History Month finale and the launch of the Black World Media Network, which is a legacy project of Don Rojas, whom you heard from earlier. And of course, the organization that has launched it is the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. The discussion, which we hope will have life, as has been discussed, is the notion of towards a global African History Month. And there seems to be some convergence of ideas around it. The idea of expanding beyond just Black History Month in the United States to the entirety of the global Black world. So Lewis, if you are managing the chat, if you could, I think we'll pull up maybe 2 or 3 questions and see, can we address them succinctly in the next 10 minutes? So Louis, what do we have here? Is that the first question you're sending for me to ask? Can we construct liberation? Louis, talk to me now.
I got you, Dr. D. The first question I'd like to lift for us comes from Kamu Taimba and Asante Sana, for the organizers of this excellent forum of some of African people's preeminent scholars and activists. Dr. Karenga and other panelists, Would you give us definition of Pan-Africanism and rules for organizing and working in coalition and alliances as a basis for creating this noble Pan-African project on the table?
All right, that's number question. That question never consumed. I think Dr. Karenga in some ways already answered that in some ways. He sort of laid that out. But that's defining Pan-Africanism. Can you give the next one, please?
Sure, I'll lift up another one for us. In addition, we have someone that asked in the chat, what do you see as prospects for building a Pan-African rites of passage program that teaches an African-centered curriculum in scope and content from the cradle? And I think
rites of passage, just take one more.
And then another one that we do have, another one from the chat that we do have, to Professor Beckles. It may not be only that Hollywood is afraid of the Haitian Revolution. It may be that not enough Black people are interested in viewing such a film. In what part Hollywood loves that which will sell. So maybe we don't have enough buyers. What is the correct balance between African and African-American history?
Okay, that's okay. All right, so let's take the last question first, and it was directed to Professor Beckles, just in terms of the film that Danny Glover, by the way, has been championing for a long time. You know, he's been wanting to get that film on the Haitian Revolution, particularly in terms of personification of Toussaint as well. So,
thank you, Ron.
Your perspective in 2 minutes.
Thank you, Ron. You know, I know you're a great timekeeper, you know. But
oh no, I've been a little lax tonight, but I'm getting ready to tighten. I'm getting ready to do the tighten up, as we used to say back in the day.
I've just taken my watch off, and I'm going to speak 1 minute on the first question and 1 minute on the second. So here's the first.
Go right ahead.
Pan-Africanism is a 20th century construct. It has served its purpose. It was absolutely the right vision, the right program, and we maxed it out. We sucked the life out of Pan-Africanism. This is the 21st century. And Pan-Africanism is proven to be a problem because we need to substitute it for global Africa. Pan-Africanism has to evolve into global Africa. Global Africanism is a 21st century vision and paradigm to allow us to have a new intellectual tool to move this struggle forward. Pan-Africanism has maxed out in terms of its political capacity. Man, was it magnificent, but we have to move on to global Africa. Second, the issue around the history and the presentation of it on the screen, no, I don't think that's the case. You know, when this Black Panther movie became the world's #1 viewing movie ever, who would have imagined that? We just don't know. We just don't know what the world wants to see. The world wants to see and know that Black people have gone through a particular set of crimes and degradations, and the world wants to know, are we still alive? How do we survive? How do we make it? And what are we doing about the future? The world is curious about this African emergence, this refusal to lie down and play dead. I don't think there's an end to what the world wants to know about Black people in this 21st century. There is a lot of minds out there that are fascinated by our journey and our revolutions to come.
Okay, Lewis, what was the second question? I was trying to scribble the notes out.
That second question I do want to I will bring us back to, but one question that I do hope that we do have enough time for that I feel is clarifying for us. There's a little, I feel like there's a bit of difference in the chat in terms of understanding the proposals of a Black History Month versus a global Black History Month, an American Black History Month versus a global Black History Month. So if some of our panelists or Dr.
Dot and I will address that. I'll kind of address that one in the conclusion. But there was we certainly want to get back to the defining Pan-Africanism, but there was another question that was raised, and I can't read my scratch.
Was it in regards to the passage program?
Yeah, rites of
African
passage.
Rites of Passage program.
So I don't
Our
know
consensus
whether someone
curriculum.
who wants to address the issue of rites of passage, or even wants to talk about what it is and how it could be helpful. I mean, in some ways, what we're talking about is kind of a collective rites of passage, but there is a specific formula of people who have worked on rites of passage programs. So I don't know if anybody wants to tackle that one or not.
Certainly I could do real quick. I know we're out of time, but we've been since the 1960s had rites of passage program called Majando for both men and women, for bringing young girls and young boys into manhood and womanhood, right? And it means teaching them the best of what it means to be African and human in the world, enabling them to move from boyhood and girlhood to manhood and womanhood. And that's what it is, cultural grounding our young people so that they are our future rather than our fate. If they turn their back on their Blackness, if they refuse to even identify with themselves, if they hate themselves, they're not our future, they are our fate. But if they ground themselves in the best of what it means to be African and human in the world and use that to orient themselves and direct their lives toward good and expansive end, then they are our future.
Okay, I'm going to turn to Dr. Nelson and Dr. Akome again, just on the issue. There was some discussion about how do we do it, structure and maybe strategies that could be employed to give each of you about 2 minutes each to starting with you, Dr. Claire Nelson.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think organizing operates on the different levels in which we're currently organized. I don't believe in starting something totally new necessarily if something already exists. How are we organized here in America? We're organized along faith-based lines. We're organized along social lines. So by social lines, I'm including like the Black Greeks and those kinds of social organizations. We're organized along professional lines. And then we're organized along, let's say, HBCUs. Those are spaces where we have some control, so to speak. Ever since AU, I have been saying to people, there should be in each organizational structure some big project, some global project in which they see themselves as shaping the architecture of the world in which we're living. And that's become even more important now. So if we're talking about the issue of poverty and some rules around which Professor Akome was alluding to, right? It means that our professional organizations that are working on big ideas, data processing, so they're looking at the rules around how will AI be How will AI be utilized in the future? We need to have organizations that are focused not just on their individual company being the best unicorn, black whatever, but look on what might it mean when we find that even right now we're seeing a situation where AI has been used to destabilize this country, it's been used to destabilize Europe, and we don't even have a big search engine. We don't have a satellite which we control. We don't have a server database that we control. So there needs to be some project around the actual material manifestations of technology and engineering necessary to move forward. And that's where also where HBCUs come in. So some of the work that's happening now with HBCUs, trying to link up with schools in Africa, especially around engineering and technology, that's critical. I think the Black church is just trying to take on some of the work around social development, education, the rites of passage. They can scope out that space as their responsibility, including having a conversation about the demonization of African religions, Yoruba, Ifa, Voodoo, all these things which have been demonized need to be reconstructed. So there's another body of work. So every group can find a place, put out its vision of AU 2063, and then work backwards. If you were alive, if I'm going to be 105 in 2063, what would I want to look back on and smile and see? And working backwards, what must I do now to start on that journey?
Right. Specialization and division of labor. I'm a great proponent of that. Dr. Akome, Professor.
I also don't think that, naturally, there'll be new institutions.
Your volume is a little low.
Oh, sorry. I think what we need is more coordination so that we don't waste time in reinventing the wheel. So I agree with Dr. Nelson that, you know, a lot of the institutions we have already are doing different work, but sometimes, you know, okay, so I don't see that much working together across regional divides that we have accepted as normal. So, you know, there are Africans who are recent immigrants to the US. I don't really see a lot of the organizations that they have working. Well, there's a generational thing. So maybe the younger people are working together more. But people of my generation kind of stay within their hometown associations or the professional associations based on country of origin. People don't even cross those regional boundaries. So we need to do better and cross those boundaries, work together with one another. If we say that we have skills and technological capacity, I agree. What are the purposes to which we are putting the skills and capacity? Where are we spending our money? You know, how are we using the resources that we have to foster the strengthening of institutions that matter to us? And I think also, you know, consciousness, developing a renewed consciousness about the urgency of the challenges that we face and the need to respond to them in meaningful and tenacious ways is what is more important than necessarily going and building a whole slew of new institutions. So tech capacity, the finance, the telling of stories, the educational institutions and analysis that we're doing, you know, kind of working together and coordinating so that we have a common purpose, building a united front and realizing that if we work together, we don't even have to like one another, you know, but are there things that we see as crucial that are essential to move our, you know, global Africa forward? We all need to get on the same program and do these things and do them with a lot of passion and seriousness.
Well, Louis, you are our program manager, right, for the Pan-African Unity Dialogue. I already told you to tag Dr. Akoma because we have a Pan-African Unity Dialogue in the city of New York that does exactly that and has been working on it for years and years and years. And Dr. Leonard Jeffries is a charter member, as is Dr. Julius Garvey. Our dear beloved brother, now deceased, Dr. Ronald Walters, wrote a book about Pan-Africanism, and he may have posited in there that we needed to practice Pan-Africanism at home. By that, he meant in the United States. And so we took him up on that proposition because you're exactly right. The fact that we're in the same spaces together does not mean we are working together. But in the Pan-African Unity Dialogue, we work together. We bring together both continental Africans and Caribbean Americans and Afro-Latinos and so-called African Americans in one space to do exactly what you're talking about. And we want to build that out globally. So we are going to recruit you in order to operationalize this concept and help us with it. And we really, really, really need, so anyway, stand by to be recruited. Now let's move quickly on to conclusion. I'm going to call on our Paramount Chief for some brief overarching comments on what he has heard and how he sees this concept, whether he is willing to offer his, dare I say, blessing or his advice or his sense of the not only the viability but the value of this proposition. He is 85, still alive, and ain't taking no jive. Our Paramount Chief, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, for some succinct, and he knows that when I mean succinct, I do mean succinct closing, because we have to get to Don and a couple of other things as we close. But we yield the floor to you as our paramount chief.
Well, certainly, Madasi. In Akan, that means thank you, thank you. I am delighted that we were able to come through with the chaos going on in the world at this time, to have some of us sit down and begin to think through what we have to do. We're what we've been looking for. There may be others out there doing wonderful things, but this collectivity reflects who we are and who we want to be and who we need to be. When our talk was on the question of the UNESCO project, of course, I ran in the back. My wife was saying the books are here, the books are there. I'm talking about Dr. Rosin Jeffrey. She was trying to tell me what to do. And this is one of the volumes of the famous UNESCO project that Dr. John Henry Clark and others helped to encourage Dr. Ambo to produce. So this becomes a base from which we can take this formulation and begin to produce other volumes that relate to this attempt to control our history. And of course, the institutions and organizations that we are developing need to plug into the HBCUs or the various social organizations or the various intellectual organizations or the cultural organizations or the multifaceted organizations like Dr. Maulana has developed out of his base. And so we really have to understand that we're on a sacred mission, and their ancestors are looking to us to let us know what we need to do. Luckily, I have my wife, and she was the first to make the African pilgrimage. She went in 1960. I followed in 1961, and I've still been going ever since. And so we have to link up the African family in real ways. This couple of shots will speak volumes for us. This is the great Ashanti king, Otumfuo Pokawari II. And he brought us into his personal relationship, the various groups that came, the various organizations. And then once you can break the barrier of getting past the gawking and oh my goodness, is that real goal? These are real spirit people working, and they want us, they need us, they're demanding that we come and join them. And so this great Otumfuo represents that in the African tradition. But the most important thing is Pan-Africanism is a great period that we need to master. Our great scholars and whatnot that came out of that period. And one of them, a small dynamo like Dr. John Henry Clark and was Dudley Thompson, Ambassador Dudley Thompson. This is a brother that came up out of born in Panama, of Jamaican parents, made it to Westmoreland, up in the hills, got an education, not the high education that's available in the University of the West Indies, but he went to Michael. Michael is that middle, but he had the world experience. This is him with Jomo Kenyatta. Why? Because he helped to save the Mau Mau movement. Right. It was his relationship with Jomo Kenyatta that led to he got a team of 15 lawyers, international lawyers, to fight to save the Mau Mau and their sacred land. Right. So
Dr. Jeffries, I take it that we have your blessing to move forward with this project, because we know that you could do the roll call as you reach for resource after resource after resource. So we really, really appreciate it that you're giving it your blessing. So I think Dr. Karenga is raising his hand for 1 minute.
Yes, one quick thing. I just wanted to say to Professor Becker, I really want us to keep Pan-Africanism.
Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to have that discussion.
Okay, but what we want to do is define it in a global sense.
Yes.
So Pan-Africanism is thought, sentiment, and practice dedicated to the unity, the liberation, the development, and flourishing of African people everywhere, right? And so that means taking Africa as the moral idea and the center of our conversation. That saves our historical religions, right? That saves our conversation about who we are.
Excuse me. What this means is, this topic, which I looked at that, This
Yeah.
sounds like a forum for
Yes.
the Black World Media Network
Let's
to
do it.
have this conversation,
I'm
because
with
it
you.
is
I'm with you.
that
I'm
would be
with
a
you.
great conversation, and we'll pull
Yeah.
people in on it, and that'll be a
That's
part of this
right.
project moving forward. Now I want to turn, excuse me, the chair
allow me to say
rules,
this.
the chair rules that we must move forward. I now want to turn to our
We
esteemed
talk to you.
founder of the Black World Media Network, Don Rojas, who is counting on your support. And by the way, let me just say that, Professor Beckles, we anticipate that you're going to have a monthly program or podcast. Dr. Karenga has agreed to do a monthly lecture series. We know that there's going to be a futurist-oriented program by Dr. So you're already seeing some of the powerful people. But Don Rojas, would you take a couple of minutes, please, to just give people a preview of what's coming with the Black World Media Network that you have innovated and created, and that we are going to, in the spirit of Ujima and Ujima and Kujachagalia, and all of them principles, including Nia and Imani, we're going to make this happen.
Teach. All right.
All right, thank you, Dr. Daniels. Well, I just want a quick word on upcoming programs and specials that we have been developing. At this very moment, our online radio station is playing a 1-hour special tribute to our beloved friend and comrade, Harry Belafonte, who will mark his 95th birthday tomorrow, March 1st.
Wow. Yes.
This is a special production featuring Harry singing some of his immortal hits, along with clips from interviews and speeches that he had made over the years, and in which he speaks about his childhood years growing up in Jamaica, and about the first time that he met Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and much more. And we are indebted to a longtime radio personality, Brother Rennie Bishop, for producing this brilliant salute to Harry Belafonte. So be sure to listen tonight and tomorrow and the day after. We'll be looping this tribute. It's a 1-hour tribute to our beloved Harry Belafonte. So long live Brother Harry. Coming very soon to our network is a monthly program to be hosted by the inimitable George Fraser. George Fraser is the founder and the CEO of FraserNet, which with over 1 million members is the largest and the most influential organization of Black professionals and entrepreneurs in the world. And in his premiere show, George Fraser conducts a fascinating interview with 2 prominent Black entrepreneurs, Dr. Randall Pinkett and Dr. Jeffrey Robinson, both of whom co-authored the best-selling book titled Black Faces in High Places. Also in development is a program to be hosted by Reverend Dennis Dillon. He's the Chief Minister of the Brooklyn Christian Center and publisher of the Christian Times. And he has been for many years a staunch advocate for economic development and financial empowerment in Africa, the Caribbean, and Black America. Also in development is a weekly program that will focus on the organizing and mobilizing work of the Black Lives Matter movement across the country. And that show will be hosted by Los Angeles-based Baba Akili, who is a member of the board of the Institute of the Black World 21st Century. Also developing a monthly program on African political and economic matters is Brother Pierre Sané, who we had hoped would have joined us this evening, but was unfortunately not able to do that. He is the founder and president of Images Africa, and he's a former Secretary General of Amnesty International. Other programs in the pipelines, a monthly show.
We got a taste.
All right, I got to give.
Don't let them OD on it.
All right, I mean, I'm just so excited about all the stuff.
They got a good
about
taste.
all the stuff that's in the hopper coming to you in the next few weeks. So we are thrilled to have so many collaborators. There's a sister Dr. Brenda Green, who's the founder and executive director of the Center for Black Literature at Medgar College in Brooklyn, New York.
Right.
She and her center are going to be
There's many. Milton Adamati has a weekly with Black Star News. So there are many. So I want to wrap us up in this way. by answering the question of what was meant by the theme today. It's very simple. And that is, we are looking at the reality that Black History Month, created by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, whom we celebrate, and we thank again for, we're looking to how do we then, because neo-colonial Eurocentric education, we've all been victimized by miseducation globally. So we want to see, can we just use this as a window to begin a project of bringing us together, but bringing us together with purpose, not just for sentimental reasons, as Dr. Claire Nelson stressed over and over again. It must have a purpose. And we talked about a lot of the different purposes that it could have, and they all seem meaningful and they all seem valuable. Now I'm going to ask Louis, if we're saluting our dear beloved brother, Mr. B, Harry Belafonte, if he would put into the chat how people can listen and tune in, because once they jump off here, they might want to tune in tonight. So would somebody please put the URL into the chat so people can actually do that. And again, we want people to contribute ideas, put into the chat if you want to start a program, help build a program, help expand it. We want all of that to happen. This is exciting. This is powerful. What a wonderful way to end Black History Month, but it ain't really ending. It's just, that's just the demarcation that's been laid out. We know that it's a luta continua. We know that it's forward ever, backward never. And what I really want to do to close this out is call on Dr. Maulana Karenga to have us do in the way that we often close Kwanzaa with a Harambe. So we collectively, our audience, everybody in place can close us out in a powerful spiritual way. And again, you can go to the website ibw21.org to see tremendous amounts of information on a whole bunch of things, including the Black World Media Network. But I want to thank everybody for joining us, for participating in this marvelous program. And what better way to end it than to have Dr. Maulana Karenga lead us in a virtual set of Harambes to close us out.
Thank you, Dr. Daniels. So we close our meeting the way we have since the beginning of the 60s by saying 7 Harambe. Harambe is a Swahili word that means let's all pull together and surely to build a good world we all want and deserve to live in, to complete and honor this project that we've started. You know we need to pull together. And when we say we put a hand up in the hand, put down in a fist, a strong fist, and say Harambe, Harambe. And on the last one, the 7th one, we do it 7 times for the Nguzo Saba. We see the Nguzo Saba, the 7 principles, as the moral minimum set of values that Black people need in order to rescue and reconstruct their history and humanity and shape them in their own image and interest. We believe if Black people could practice just some of these principles, some of the time, a whole new change would come in their life. And those principles, first in Swahili and then in English, are umoja, unity, kujichagulia, self-determination, ujima, collective work and responsibility, ujamaa, cooperative economics, neo, purpose, kuumba, creativity, and imani, faith. Faith in ourselves, Black people, faith in our Creator, faith in our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers, our grandmothers and grandfathers, our elders, our youth, our future. Faith in all that makes us beautiful and strong. And faith in the righteousness and victory of our cause. Faith that to hard work, long struggle, and a whole lot of love and understanding, we can again step back on the stage of human history as a free, proud, and productive people. So on the count of 3, we'll put down and say Harambe. So Ja, Li, 2. Harambe! 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 Teach.
All right. Maulana, I think you went too early.
I didn't do 7. We did 7. Well, let's do one more.
No, all right, one more. All right, brothers and sisters, thank you so much. All the panelists, we appreciate it so much. Thank you. And a big salute to Don Rojas. A big
Yes.
salute to Don Rojas. Yes.
Okay. I was getting, all right. Asante to everyone. Thanks so much.
Okay, good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night, all. Moski.
Carter G.
Yeah, I
Woodson,
want
I can see your meek and humble face. Carter G. Woodson, you brought so much power to our race. Carter G. Woodson, your spirit is still so vibrantly alive. Carter G. Woodson, may your name be sanctified. Carter G. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson, the first child born of 9, spent all his youth working in the coal mines. His formal education he began at 20, and once he got started, he sure got a plenty. The BA, the MA, the PhD, yet he never put himself above you and me. He knew that education didn't mean a degree. It means how we serve our race and all humanity. I said he knew that education didn't mean a degree. It means how we serve our race and all humanity. Carter G. Woodson, Carter G. Woodson. He brought meaning to the words, know thyself. He said you start with your history before all else. We're the parent of all humans on this earth, yet today we still struggle to reclaim our worth. He gave us a week, and now we have a month.